we are humbly trying to build something that looks like what Berkshire Hathaway did, looking into very profitable, cash flow positive, good fundamentals, good management team.
21 Capital is one of the largest publicly traded Bitcoin companies, with a little bit more than 43,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet.
We're actually happy that it's a bear market because it creates opportunities for us that we wouldn't have in a bull market.
The goal of 21 is beating the price appreciation of Bitcoin. That's the hurdle rate. That's incredibly ambitious.
I think the market is asking for a new model.
Welcome to day one of Mining Disrupt 2026 in Miami, Florida. I'm here with Rapha Zagury, newly named CEO of 21 Capital, with 43,000, a little bit more than that, 43,000 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Rapha, congratulations. Huge appointment. You said your job is to build an operating company around one of the largest Bitcoin balance sheets in the market. What does that look like over the next few years?
Yeah, I think, we are humbly trying to build something that looks like what Berkshire Hathaway did, right? Looking into very profitable, cash flow positive, profitable, good fundamentals, good management team, and then using that as a way to sustainably grow Bitcoin treasury, and more important than Bitcoin treasury, adding shareholder value to our shareholders at the end of the day. That's the goal. It's a simple one, I think, on paper. It's a hard one to deliver because we have to find these companies, train the management and understand, what they have in place. But I think it's the sustainable one in the long term. It's definitely a different business than what it's out there. I think the Bitcoin industry needs this, not only because, it's an investment, but also, and more important, to sustain the Bitcoin ecosystem, to help sustain companies out there, right? So we're very excited about what's ahead. And it's one of the few businesses that in a bear market, we're actually happy that it's a bear market because it creates opportunities for us that we wouldn't have in a bull market, right?
No, it's incredibly exciting. And some of the things that stuck out to me on the press release specifically is your emphasis on cash flow generation, disciplined capital allocation, not just accumulating Bitcoin. Why is that distinction so important?
Yeah, we could be in a situation, for example, let's say we have 100 Bitcoins in our balance sheet, right? And we find a company that is going to be generating 50 Bitcoins for us per month, right? I'm exaggerating. So what we do is that we would use the Bitcoin to convert into shares of that company. But that company arguably is adding a lot of shareholder value because it's compounding in the long term our returns in terms of Bitcoin, right? That's why I say that, measuring the company by the number of Bitcoins it has on the stack, it's probably the wrong measure. It's the same way, imagine if you would value Berkshire Hathaway only for the cash that they have in their balance sheet, and they have a ton of cash. But you also want to make sure that, the companies backing that cash flow, that cash generation are going to be there, right? Bitcoin, of course, is different than just sitting on it, in terms of fiat. It will naturally deliver a return in the long term, right? But I don't think that's the business. I think that's part of the business. And the way that we want to do it, again, ideally is to add shareholder value on a Bitcoin basis for our share.
So in the press release, you had 5 pillars, and I do want to touch upon them. So the first strategic pillar is building an institutional grade public company. Why is governance becoming such an important competitive advantage for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think, listen, 21 is a public company. So we need to have the right governance. And that goes from accounting, the obvious ones, accounting, finance, all of that. In terms of board composition also, we've done a lot of work to get the board in the right place, right? I think the company is very well positioned for all of that, but there's still infrastructure that we need to build. I'd say that this is the foundation, right? We're going to build a house. You need to build the foundation. It's not glorious work. It's going to take some time, but if you get the foundations right, you can build a massive building on top of it, right? And that's what we're going to be working. I think that's the first step. As you mentioned, there are 5 pillars. We need to staff these 5 pillars. People is the most critical part of any business. So having the right people in these jobs, I think, would be important. And on the first pillar, there's, of course, finance, legal, communications, right? Investor relations. We need to put all of these in the right place. And then it goes to the next pillars, which are the exciting ones. The second pillar is building a portfolio of operating companies. Potential transaction with Electron was announced a few months ago. That's still going through the process. We'll see where that lands. But also, more important, just like Electron, there's a lot of other companies in the Bitcoin ecosystem that we should be looking to investing and putting as part of our portfolio of operating companies, right? The third pillar feeds this one, which is M&A. So we're going to have an M&A desk that we're looking to vehicles. We could use 21 stock to buy other companies, several things that we could be doing in M&A. The next one, which is an important one as well, is capital markets. So capital markets encompasses everything that, as you said, other companies out there do. So which are sources of capital, right? We could issue convertibles, we could issue more stock, right? So there's all this quiver of different options that could be looking. But the beautiful thing is that when you have operating companies, you can actually look into securitizing revenues of these operating companies. And then on a company perspective, raising capital is a much cheaper cost of capital than going out there and issuing a preferred, which is high cost of capital. So we're very excited about the capital markets. There are other things, for example, when we think about capital markets in Bitcoin, we could be looking at taking advantage of dislocations in the market. We could be looking into, building an energy desk. Bitcoin is pure energy at the end of the day, right? So we are going to have an energy trading desk as well. And then the final one, which is further down the road, is lending that we're going to be doing. So when you look at all these 5 pillars, right, of course, you made a comparison with Berkshire Hathaway. Another comparison I like to make is, and another inspiration is looking at Glencore. So what Glencore did with commodities is instead of just extracting the commodities, right, it looked into monetizing the commodity cycle all the way from extraction to delivery to servicing to being part of the ecosystem as well. So we want to do the same thing for Bitcoin. None of this works if we don't support the asset. So another thing we want to build on 21 is a Bitcoin development support network. I don't know how we're going to do that, what the structure, but definitely in scope that we need to do that because if Bitcoin fails, none of this actually works and it's sustainable.
So Alpha, you and I are both Bitcoiners. So we denominate our net worth in Bitcoin, which I think is super important. One of the things that was mentioned in the press release that stuck out to me the most is the fact that the goal of 21 is beating the price appreciation of Bitcoin. That's the hurdle rate. That's incredibly ambitious. How important is that for you?
It's very important. I think at the end of the day, the reality is that, shareholders are giving us their capital with the expectation, or a lot of them are Bitcoiners, right? Many of them are Bitcoiners. And if we can't beat the price of Bitcoin, right, in the long term, at least on a risk-adjusted basis, right? So we can be, Bitcoin can be up, 50%, and we can be up 10, 20%. That's fine. As long as our risk is also much lower than the Bitcoin risk, right? So on a risk-adjusted basis, that's what we want to be doing. We want to be beating, trying to beat. It's very ambitious. It's going to take the right asset selection. You need to have assets that, not only work well on a standalone basis, but are uncorrelated with each other when you put them together. So for example, we're doing Bitcoin mining, right? The next asset we could be looking at is something on the lending front, which has a very complete and distinct risk return profile than just Bitcoin mining, right? Using that just as an example. But I think our industry now, is developed enough that you actually have enough products and business lines and revenue that you can build that portfolio. This was probably impossible to do 10 years ago, right? When the industry was just nascent and the companies were still developing. You really didn't have a lot of cash flow positive companies, right? Now it's the time to do that. It's too early. I think it's going to take some time to get there, but I think now is a much better time to do it.
So Alpha, you founded Electron, one of the most efficient and largest miners in the world. You guys make up roughly 5% of the global hash rate. And you touched upon this earlier. Where does Electron fit into the 21 story?
Yeah, so we announced, again, just to be very transparent and clear, we don't know yet if Electron is going to be part of 21.
But that's the plan that you guys.
That's the plan.
But there's a regulatory process that needs to go through.
Yeah. So Tether announced their intention to contribute Electron into 21. So what's going to happen now is that it's going to go through an independent process to do due diligence valuation of the company, and then the board of directors of 21 is going to make a determination. If we think that's a value add for shareholders. Of course, I do believe that's the case. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting where I'm sitting. But there's a right process to do that. We're being very careful and thoughtful in the way that we do that process. And it's going to take some time to go through. So between now and probably beginning of next year, we're going to conclude a lot of the diligence, the analysis, and other things. And more is going to come out in due time.
Awesome. I've known you for a while. You've had an incredible career in the Bitcoin space. How are you feeling right now? You're just named the CEO of one of the largest publicly traded Bitcoin companies on planet Earth. How are you feeling?
Yeah, this, but for a long time, I've been a competitive endurance athlete. And a lot of people are asking me that question, how are you feeling about this? And the feeling is very similar to the one that, where I'm sitting at the starting line of like an Ironman or a crazy event where I know I'm going to have a lot of fun. I know it's going to be very hard, right? I don't know if I'm going to finish. That's the reality, right? Because, I've done many races that in the middle, you don't feel right. And something happens and it starts raining like crazy and the race gets canceled, right? You don't know, you don't control that. But it's a mix of anxiety, excitement, right? It's kind of like the similar feeling I'm having right now. But I know that at the different than a race, this doesn't have an end, right? But I think the analogy sits because that you go through and going through like the very similar emotions, but it's very exciting. Like, and I wouldn't be standing on the starting line of one of those crazy brutal races. A lot of people question like, why you're doing this? You're gonna suffer for 10 or more hours to finish something, right? And it's the sense of accomplishment of doing something that, it's not something that you would do every day, just saying challenging your limits, right? That I'm passionate about that. That's literally is what drives me on a day-to-day basis. So personally, very excited. I think when we think about where the market is right now, I also think it's the right timing. I think it's the right time for mining. Everybody's exiting mining. There's a good time for mining, right? And even more important, it's the right time for 21 as well, because on 21, it's a bear market. I think the market is asking for a new model, right? We've been seeing people ask like, okay, so we want a model of operating companies, right? So 21 comes I think, at the right time to fulfill that. And this has been conversations we've been having for a long time. I've been part of the board of 21 now pretty much since the beginning of the year, right? So we've been having these conversations. And it's very exciting to be able to now go and deploy and get it ready.
Well, congratulations, Rapha. It's a huge accomplishment. Like I said, like you were saying, it's the beginning of an incredible journey that's ahead of you. Last thing I'll leave with you guys, Rapha did mention it. He's an endurance athlete, and his resting heartbeat is 21 beats per minute. Anyways, Rapha Zagury on through. It's partly true. Rapha Zagury, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.